Have you ever felt like you had to shrink yourself just to keep the peace? Like, there's a part of you that wants to speak more honestly, more truthfully, to show up more boldly, with more courage, to really share what you really care about, what you're passionate about. But something inside you actually jumps in and pulls the handbrake. So you end up softening your opinions to fit in. You edit or filter or censor yourself. Maybe you downplay your passions and what you care about, and you keep certain parts of yourself hidden from the world and from others. And maybe if you're anything like me, you're afraid of being too much, too intense, or too emotional, too honest, too different, or too visible. And what happens is over time, that really starts to hurt and starts to eat at you. Because there's nothing more exhausting than performing a watered down, censored, apologetic version of yourself just to stay accepted. And I know this feeling so intimately. I mean, there were years where I felt so friggin' terrified to speak openly about the things that mattered most to me around mental health and addiction and emotional healing, trauma, nervous system work, my own struggles, my own story, my own truth and my passions. I mean, I worried it would be too heavy for people. I worried that it would be too triggering for certain people, too confronting, too much. And so I filtered myself and I didn't show up fully, or I didn't show up at all. I held things back for a very long time. And I dimmed my light to make other people comfortable, to try and protect their egos. And it cost me. It cost me so much. It cost me clarity on my purpose and my direction. It cost me momentum moving forward towards my dreams and my goals. It cost me authenticity because just wasn't being who I am. And it created this internal struggle, this internal conflict and resistance. What I believe is that when you're not expressing what's true for you, something inside you actually starts to shut down. And maybe you felt this too. Maybe at work where you know that you have some ideas worth sharing and perspectives and opinions that you want to vocalize in team meetings, but you hold them back for fear of them not being good enough or fear of being treated differently. Or maybe it's not a psychologically safe environment. You're afraid of potentially compromising job security. Or in relationships, where you have something that you're sitting with that feels uncomfortable, but you're not sharing it, or you're softening your truth. You're not being truly honest. Maybe if you're like me online and you are showing up in your business, but you're actually editing yourself to be more palatable to your audience. And so, what is the saying? If you're trying to be everything to everyone, you end up being nothing to no one. And so what happens is you stop yourself from fully going after what you love and what you care about and what you know is true and authentic to you. And you don't want to trigger people, maybe. You don't want to be judged. You don't want to be rejected. But I've come across a much deeper truth. When you dim your light to make others feel comfortable, you're actually slowly disconnecting from yourself. You're chipping away at the relationship that you have with yourself. You become fragmented. And I know what that's like. It's very painful. And so in this episode, we're going to talk about this properly. What does it actually mean to shine your light? Maybe you've heard about it in a personal development space or different circles. Let's define what that means. Why so many people are afraid to do it, why you might be afraid to do it. What's actually happening physiologically, neurologically, in your brain, in your body, when you suppress your truth? How fear of judgment and the very cunning, toxic, sociocultural stigma and syndrome that we have here in Australia, tall poppy syndrome, how that keeps people playing very small, where these patterns even begin in the first place, and really to invite you to step into your power without needing anyone's approval. So by the end of this episode, I just want you to feel seen. I want you to understand why perhaps you've been holding yourself back. And I want to invite you to step forward more fully into who you are and into who you know you are, into alignment, into your honest truth, into your unapologetic self, into being liberated. So stay with me. What does it actually mean to shine your light? I believe shining your light means being authentic, as in every single moment, being fully self-expressed, right? Being honest about your emotions and being honest with who you are and being aligned with what you care about and expressing yourself without constant filtering, standing in your truth even when it feels uncomfortable, right? And this is not about you going to the rooftops or the mountaintops and screaming and shouting everything that you're passionate about. It just means being real, right? And acknowledging that it's just living truthfully on a moment by moment basis. It's not about performing all the time. There's a very big difference here. And I dimmed my light for so many years. As I said to you, I felt so afraid about opening up about what mattered to me after going through my own journey with mental health and addiction and healing and trauma and grief. I mean, to some people, this can seem quite heavy. And I was afraid that I'd be too much, that I would be too confronting. And so I softened everything. Maybe if you're like me, I mean, I felt like the black sheep for many years in my workplace, in my social circles, even in my own family, right? And that can be really difficult to sit with. I mean, I said in recent episodes as well, like even after launching my first business, I delayed sharing it fully. I filtered my message. I held back from fully sharing my story. And then even more recently, after relationship loss and going through illness in my family, I was just holding on to so much grief and so much tension, so much emotion. And I mean, there were moments where I questioned everything. I mean, what's the point in even sharing any of this, right? Like, will anyone understand? Will it resonate? And that fear silenced me. It kept me so paralyzed. It might be keeping you paralyzed. Until I realized something very important, not just cognitively, but in an embodied sense. You're not here to be for everyone. You are not for everyone. I love Pete Holmes, one of my favorite comedians. He's absolutely hilarious. And he is also an incredibly intelligent, awakened, brilliant, beautiful soul. And he has a Netflix special called I Am Not For Everyone. I think it's a beautiful message to share with his audience, because that's true. You're not for everyone. You're just here to be honest. And I believe that when everyone can just be honest and living life in alignment with who they are and what they care about, there'd be a lot less finger pointing, to take inspiration from my good friend Alex Horton. When we're all living out our lives in alignment, then we can actually contribute to something from a place of authenticity and congruence and peace in our own skin. When we're not feeling at peace with who we are, then we're more likely to project outwards, right? And to cast envy and blame and shame and jealousy onto other people. And that in many ways is why people dim their light, right? There's a fear of rejection. There's a fear of judgment. There's a fear of being treated differently, of being too much, fear of triggering others, right? And, if you've struggled with mental health or, mental and emotional challenges, which, maybe you have, otherwise you may not be here with me, but maybe you're like me and you're like, well, I don't want to come across as a burden to anyone. My issues are too much for people. And the nervous system is wired for belonging with the tribe. So sharing all of who you are, standing out, right? Doing something different, being true to who you are, which may mean that you are going against the grain or against the values or the norms of your community, of your tribe, that can feel really unsafe from a nervous system perspective. And so it adapts. You adapt. You stay small to stay accepted. And there's a biological cost of dimming your light. I really want to make a concerted effort here to touch on the science and what it actually supports about your suppression, your emotional suppression and your authenticity. It's really important to be precise here. Now, there is science that supports that emotional suppression and low authenticity is linked to stress and lower well-being. Right, and I want, as I make these claims, I do want to ground it in some real evidence here. What's real and what's not? Because maybe if you're in the personal development space or the self-help space, you may have come across this study. It's the Spain study that's like authenticity is 4,000 times more powerful than love. But the evidence, what it actually supports is that suppression of emotional expression often increases the physiological load on your nervous system. So there's a really well-known review in the Journal of Abnormal Psychology, Gross and Levinson in 1997. It was on emotional regulation, suppression, and it found that suppression actually reduced outward expression, but also increased sympathetic nervous system activation, i.e. fight or flight. And this means that the body can look calm on the outside, but you become very activated on the inside, which, speaking to that sense of internal friction or resistance that I was talking about, when you're not acting in congruence with who you are. Neuroimaging work from Golden, 2008, found that suppression can also be associated with increased activation in areas like your amygdala, your threat detection system, your survival-based mammalian brain. And these regions are linked with threat detection, as I said. But there is an important nuance here. Suppression isn't always harmful in every context, but chronically relying on emotional suppression, as in suppressing the full, authentic expression of your emotional state, it is associated with more stress, poorer emotional outcomes. It's been linked with higher stress responses and worse interpersonal functioning in a study by Gross and John, 2003. So people who are habitually suppressing their emotions and they're not allowing themselves to be fully self-expressed do report lower well-being, do report less satisfying relationships. And when we're talking about authenticity, right, because it is such a buzzword and it's used so liberally, the science here, there is research on dispositional authenticity. There was an authenticity scale that was developed by Wood in 2008. It showed that people who report living more authentically tend to report greater well-being. They have a higher life satisfaction, more vitality, better relationship quality. Now, all of that sounds great. There is a nuance here that most of the research is correlational. It does show strong association. It doesn't prove that authenticity alone causes all these outcomes. But the pattern that I want you to walk away with here as we come out of this, the science, is that there is a consistent pattern. Living in alignment with yourself is linked with better psychological functioning. When your behavior consistently conflicts with your values, with your identity, this does create an internal tension. Wood, again in 2008, refers to this as self-alienation, like you've alienated yourself from yourself, or incongruence. And that is associated with lower well-being, higher distress. So the clean, evidence-based, science-backed takeaway here is that chronic suppression and inauthentic living, i.e. you dimming your light, is linked with higher stress and lower well-being. Authenticity is linked with higher well-being and healthier relationships. But unfortunately, in many cultures, especially in Australia, there is an unspoken rule that I want to speak about right now. It's don't stand out too much. Don't get too big. Don't get too confident, right? Because if you rise, you might get cut down. Tall poppy syndrome. And I speak to a lot of high achievers. I work with the Young Achiever Awards community here in Australia. And I'll speak to a lot of bright young minds under the age of 30 that are building really meaningful ventures and have really beautiful dreams to create impact in Australia and around the whole world. And a lot of them constantly come to me with this challenge of like, well, I'm afraid of how I might be perceived should I continue down this path, or I'm already doing this and I'm winning awards and I'm starting to get treated differently by my friends, by my family, by the people in my workplace. They're starting to get envious and jealous. And so now I feel like I need to downplay my achievements. I should hide how ambitious I am. I should suppress how fully self-expressed I can be because it feels much safer to blend in with these people, to stand out. So it's better that I just protect other people's egos. And I get it. I've been there. But this creates a world where people feel completely disconnected from themselves. It's so subtle, but it's so toxic. And I am so passionate about changing this, if you can't already tell. I believe that if you're in this conversation with me, you're part of a really important shift in consciousness as we learn to value and uplift and support and acknowledge and get around the achievements of everyone and support them in living in congruence with their passions and what they really get excited and lit up about, right? Because when you suppress your truth, when you decide to play small just to protect the fragile egos of people around you, you end up feeling flat. You feel frustrated. You feel unseen. You feel misaligned. And over time, this becomes low energy, low confidence. You lack direction because your system knows that you're not fully expressed. I believe by you tuning into this conversation with me, it shows you how powerful and supportive and aligned you can be when you do shine your light fully. Because sometimes we when we're dimming our light, we may avoid triggering others. Maybe it's people closest to us who decided not to shine their light fully, and so us doing so triggers parts of themselves that they haven't fully embraced or integrated yet. And we don't want to make people uncomfortable. Maybe it's mum or dad or a brother or a sister or your partner. We don't want to outgrow these relationships. We don't want to face envy. We don't want to be the black sheep. And so then we shrink down. But protecting everyone else's comfort at the cost of your authenticity leads to long-term disconnection from yourself. And so I really want you to hear this clearly. You are not responsible for managing everyone's ego. You're not. Now, when you're authentic, you take aligned action. That means action that is in alignment, in congruence with your values and your identity. It feels really inspired. As a result, you're making clearer decisions. As a result, you're speaking more honestly. Again, I feel like I'm in full alignment right now, talking to you about stuff that I deeply care about. I want to serve. I want to support. I want to show you what I believe in. And as a result, I'm speaking very honestly. And as a result, I'm building an audience of people who resonate. That's what happens for you. You attract people who resonate. This creates momentum. Opportunities then come from alignment and clarity, not you forcing things. What I've found is when people feel your authenticity and they feel how much you care about something at an unconscious level, trust is built and it increases and connection deepens and collaboration becomes easier. I've always said, even since I started this journey, going against the grain, and sort of carving out my own path, that vulnerability is the bridge to building trust in relationships. The deepest and most meaningful and profound relationships that I have in my life have been built on a rock solid foundation of raw vulnerability and honesty and authenticity. And it's so beautiful because I never have to worry about being someone else to try and fit in with this person. I don't even have time for that. And I don't have to worry about the person in the relationship not doing so either, because we have built this beautiful relationship on vulnerability and authenticity. And it's not about being liked by everyone, right? It's just about being real enough to attract the right people. And life or God or the universe or whatever you want to call it will actually take away the relationships and the friendships that no longer resonate with you and your authenticity, and start bringing in new people that resonate with your level of authenticity. And there's going to be a period of time there as you're learning how to shine your light fully and unapologetically, where you do part ways, or you distance yourself, or other people distance themselves from you. And I've gone through, really heartbreaking, scary, confronting, lonely chapter where I was like, man, I am changing and my values and my identity is shifting, and I no longer resonate with the people that I'm hanging out with, but I haven't found my tribe of people who I do resonate with. And you hear your Joe Rogans and your Chris Williamson and your Alex Hormozy talk about this lonely chapter, and it's a very real thing. And the price of shining your light fully is going through it. But I tell you, on the other side of it is just some of the most beautiful, magical, deep, meaningful relationships and opportunities that come your way. And I want that for you. And that's why I want to leave you with some real practical steps so that you can shine your light. First step is just notice where you're holding back. Where are you filtering yourself? in specific environments, at work, in relationships, online, on Instagram, and then name the fear. Step 2. What are you afraid will happen of you shining your light fully? And that's where your work is, I believe. You're afraid of being seen differently by different people. You're afraid of losing some followers. You're afraid of, perhaps being shut down by someone. What's beneath that, right? Because when you can actually understand that and integrate it, then it no longer becomes an issue. You can kind of, be with that and just sit in the discomfort and breathe through it, which brings me to step 3. Actually regulate the nervous system, right? Because you shining your light fully is also based upon your ability to be able to hold capacity for whatever comes your way. There's a big reason why Tony Robbins dives deep into breath work before he becomes seen fully by tens of thousands of people at his live events, right? Breathing, movement, journaling, grounding, whatever it is that helps you regulate yourself is super important, because your capacity for safety will help you in being able to be and stay fully self-expressed, regardless of what other people think or say. Step 4 is just start small, right? Speak honestly once in a meeting at work, or just post something that you're afraid of posting just once. Share something real once. And it's just exposure therapy, right? The small acts compound and they build your confidence. And step 5 is accept, in the words of the great Pete Holmes, you're not for everyone. You don't need universal approval, right? It's just about finding your tribe, your community of people who really resonate with what you're saying. So I hope this was powerful for you. I hope this has encouraged you to step fully into your power and to shine your light unapologetically, because you don't need to become someone else. You need to become more of yourself, right? This is what Carl Jung was talking about when he spoke about individuation. You don't have to be perfect. You just got to be real. The world doesn't need a more filtered version of you. It needs an honest, congruent, aligned, authentic one, right? So, if this was helpful for you, if this supported you in some way, please let me know. Please reach out on social media. I invite any and every piece of feedback. I'm open to it. And, if it was supportive for you, if it resonated with you, please share it with someone else who might be dimming their light at the moment. I think when every single one of us can shine our light unapologetically and beautifully, then we're going to be living in a really, really different world where everyone's at peace with who they are, right? Because the conflict that we're seeing at a collective level is a result of the conflict that's within us. So when we can reconcile and resolve that and feel more at peace with who we are, then, I believe we're going to be living in a very different, more calm, peaceful world. So thank you for being part of this movement. I love you so much. I'll see you in the next episode.